The stars shone bright against the black of space as Mason Carter piloted his ship through the quiet sector. The Horizon's Edge was not the newest ship in the galaxy, but it was his. He had spent 10 years saving money to buy it. Now he and his crew made a living finding and selling old ship parts. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Olivia. She was his first officer and had been with him since the beginning. Her eyes were fixed on the screen in front of her. Mason moved to her station and looked over her shoulder. "What is it?" "A ship, I think. But it's not in any of our databases." Mason frowned. Unknown ships were rare in this part of space. Most vessels were registered with the Earth Alliance or one of the colony systems. "Show me," he said. The main screen lit up with an image that made Mason's breath catch. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It seemed to flow like water with no hard edges. The metal, if it was metal, shimmered with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. "Is it active?" Mason asked. Ben, his engineer, shook his head. "No power readings. It's just drifting." Mason drummed his fingers on the console. Salvage rights were clear. A derelict ship was fair game, and something this unusual could be worth a fortune. "Prep the shuttle," he decided. "Olivia, you're with me." "Ben, keep the engines hot. If anything seems off, be ready to pull us out fast." 20 minutes later, Mason and Olivia floated through the silent alien ship. Their lights cast eerie shadows on the curved walls. The inside was even stranger than the outside. Nothing was labeled in any language Mason recognized. "Look at this," Olivia called. She pointed her light at dark stains on the floor. The liquid was thick and purple, dried to the consistency of glue. Blood? Mason wondered. Not human, that's for sure. They moved deeper into the ship. The air was stale but breathable through their masks. Signs of a fight were everywhere. Burn marks on walls, broken equipment, more of the strange purple substance. "What happened here?" Mason whispered. They found the answer in the lower level of the ship. A room filled with clear tubes, each big enough to hold a person. Most were broken, their contents gone, but one still glowed with a soft blue light. Inside was a woman. At least she looked mostly like a woman. Her skin had a pearl-like shine that caught the light in impossible ways. Her hair floated around her face as if she were underwater, even though the tube was filled with gas, not liquid. Her features were almost human, but too perfect, too symmetrical. "Is she alive?" Olivia asked, pressing her gloved hand against the tube. Mason checked the readings on his scanner. "Yes, in some kind of stasis. We should call this in," Olivia said. "The Alliance will want to know about this." Mason didn't answer right away. The Alliance would take over, claim the ship and everything in it for research. The woman would disappear into some lab, and his crew would get nothing but a small finder's fee. "The comms are down," he lied. "Interference from the ship's hull." Olivia gave him a sharp look. She knew him too well. "Mason, this is way above our pay grade. We don't know what we're dealing with." "She's a prisoner," Mason said, pointing to the restraints visible around the woman's wrists. "We can't just leave her." Before Olivia could argue more, Mason began examining the tube's control panel. It was covered in strange symbols, but some basics of ship design were universal. After a few minutes of careful testing, he found what he was looking for. The tube hissed and the blue light faded. "Mason!" Olivia protested, but it was too late. The front of the tube slid open. Cold mist poured out, swirling around their feet. The woman fell forward and Mason caught her. She was lighter than she looked, as if her bones were hollow. Her eyes fluttered open. They were unlike any eyes Mason had seen. The irises shifted colors like oil on water. She looked at him, confusion clear on her face. She spoke, but the sounds were like music, not words. Chimes and bell-like tones that made no sense. Mason tapped his translator, but it only sparked and died. Whatever language she spoke, it wasn't in the database. The woman tried again. This time her voice was raspy, as if she was forcing her vocal cords to make unfamiliar sounds. "They will return," she managed. "Hide me." Her eyes rolled back and she went limp in Mason's arms. Olivia cursed under her breath. "Now what, Captain?" Mason adjusted his grip on the unconscious woman. "Now we get her back to the ship. And then we help her." Getting back to the Horizon's Edge wasn't easy. The woman remained unconscious, and carrying her through the zero gravity of the damaged ship took all of Mason's skill. Once aboard their own vessel, they took her to the medical bay. Dr. Kelly Porter, their medic, ran every test she could think of. "Her biology is fascinating," she told Mason later. Similar to human in some ways, completely alien in others. Her blood isn't even blood as we know it. Will she live? Mason asked. I think so. Her vital signs are getting stronger. But Mason, what were you thinking? We know nothing about her or who put her in that tube. Mason had been asking himself the same question. Why had he been so quick to free her? Something about seeing her trapped had touched a nerve. Maybe it was because he had spent too many years feeling trapped himself, working dead-end jobs on crowded Earth until he could afford his freedom among the stars. Can you wake her? He asked. Kelly shook her head. I wouldn't risk it. Her system is already dealing with enough shock. Let her wake naturally. Mason nodded and settled into a chair next to the medical bed. He would wait. And when she woke, he would get answers. Who was she? Who had imprisoned her? And why did he feel that by rescuing her, he had just changed the course of his life forever? The ship's alarms chose that moment to blare to life. Captain, to the bridge. Olivia's voice came over the comm. Unknown ships approaching fast. They're not responding to hails. Mason looked at the sleeping alien woman. Had they found trouble or had trouble found them? Mason ran to the bridge, his heart pounding. The main screen showed 3 ships closing in on their position. They were sleek and black with shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. What are they? He asked, dropping into the captain's chair. Ben shook his head. Nothing in our database matches. But they're fast, Captain. Really fast. Weapons? Mason asked. Can't tell, Olivia replied, fingers dancing over her console. But they're not broadcasting friendly signals. Mason thought quickly. The Horizon's Edge was a salvage vessel, not a warship. They couldn't win a fight. Full power to engines, he ordered. Get us out of here. The ship lurched as Ben pushed the thrusters to their limits. The stars on the view screen blurred. They're following, Olivia reported. And gaining. Mason hit the comm button. Kelly, how's our guest? Still unconscious, the doctor replied. What's happening? We might have company soon. Keep her hidden. Mason cut the connection and turned to his pilot. Laura, there's an asteroid field near here. Can you get us there? Laura nodded, her face tense with concentration. Yes, but it'll be tight. Do it, Mason ordered. If we can't outrun them, we'll outmaneuver them. The Horizon's Edge changed course, heading for a dense field of spinning rocks. It was a dangerous move, but Mason was out of options. As they entered the field, Mason felt a presence behind him. He turned to find the alien woman standing in the doorway. She was dressed in a medical gown, her pearl-like skin seeming to glow even in the dim light of the bridge. You need to hide, she said. Her voice was still strange, but now the translator could make sense of her words. You speak English? Mason asked, surprised. I learn quickly, she said, each word coming easier than the last. Your device to translator helped. A sudden blast rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed across all stations. They're firing on us, Ben shouted. The alien woman moved to the front of the bridge, her movements smooth and graceful despite her recent unconsciousness. They track royal artifacts, she said, pointing to a small container Mason had brought from the alien ship. Inside were strange objects he had thought might be valuable. Those things? Mason asked. What are they? Royal seals, she replied. Of Luminar Concordance, my people. Another blast hit them, closer this time. The ship's shields were failing fast. Laura, find us a big asteroid, Mason ordered. Something iron-rich that might block their scanners. The pilot nodded and guided the ship deeper into the field. There, she said after a tense minute. That one's almost pure iron ore. Mason looked at the massive rock tumbling slowly through space. Get us behind it. Power down everything except life support. As the engines died and the lights dimmed to emergency levels, Mason turned to the alien woman. We need answers. Who are you? Why were you in that tube? And who's trying to kill us? She seemed to consider her words carefully. My name is Lysithea. I was taken during peace mission. Her strange eyes reflected the red emergency lights. Those who chase us are void harvesters. They sell rare beings to highest bidders. Slavers, Olivia said with disgust. Lysithea nodded. Yes, slavers. And the artifacts? Mason asked, looking at the container. Proof of my identity. Only royal family carries such seals. Her face changed, showing what Mason thought might be fear. They contain tracking elements. Void harvesters used to find me. Mason picked up the container. So if we dump these in space? No, Lysithea said sharply. Without seals, my people will not believe my identity. Cannot return home. Mason set the container down again. Then we're stuck. Laura spoke up from her station. They're scanning the field systematically. It's only a matter of time before they find us. Mason looked at Lisa Thea. There was more to her story, he was sure of it. You said royal family. What does that mean? Lisa Thea straightened her posture, and suddenly she looked different. More regal. More alien. I am High Member of Luminar Royal House. Taken during mission to prevent war. Mason felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about rescuing one person anymore. What happens if you don't get back to your people? They will think I was killed, she said simply. They will blame your species. They will attack. Many worlds will die. She looked directly at Mason, including Earth. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Captain, Ben said finally, the nearest Alliance outpost is 3 days away at full speed. We could request military escort. Mason shook his head. Alliance will just lock her up for study. Trading one prison for another won't solve anything. We need allies, Olivia suggested. People who can help us get her home without the Alliance finding out. Mason thought for a moment. Callisto Station. It's close and they don't ask questions. Criminals and outlaws, Lysithea observed. She had clearly been learning their language rapidly. Sometimes you need people who work outside the system, Mason told her. Can you trust us to help you? Lysithea studied his face. Her eyes seemed to see more than just his physical features. You freed me when others would not. I will trust you, Mason Carter. The harvesters are moving away from our position, Laura announced. They might be giving up. Or regrouping, Olivia warned. Either way, it's our chance, Mason decided. Laura, plot a course for Callisto Station. Use the asteroid field for cover as long as possible. As the horizon's edge slowly powered back up, Mason noticed Lysithea examining the ship with obvious curiosity. Your technology, she said. It is primitive, but interesting. Compared to your people? Mason asked. Luminar have traveled stars for 100,000 years, she replied. Your species is young. Mason wondered what her world must be like. Can you tell us about your home? Lysithea's expression softened. Luminar Concordance spans 1,000 worlds. We are beings of light and thought. Our cities float in clouds. Our ships move between stars and moments. Sounds like paradise, Kelly said. She had come to the bridge and was checking Lysithea's vital signs. Not paradise, Lysithea corrected. We have problems too. Different from yours, but still problems. She looked out at the stars. Balance of power is delicate. My capture has upset this balance. How were you captured? Olivia asked. If your people are so advanced. Lysithea's face darkened. Betrayal. Someone in royal court helped void harvesters. Her hands clenched into fists. When I return, there will be justice. Mason realized there was much more to this mysterious woman than he had first thought. She wasn't just a victim to be rescued. She was a powerful figure from an advanced civilization. And somehow he had gotten caught in the middle of what sounded like an interstellar political crisis. We'll get you home, he promised her. But first, we need to survive the trip. The ship's engines hummed to life, and they began their careful journey through the asteroid field. Lysithea stood beside Mason, watching the stars. For a moment, he saw their situation through her eyes. A primitive ship, a ragtag crew facing enemies with vastly superior technology. Their chances seemed slim. But as he looked at Lysithea's determined face, Mason felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Whatever happened next, their lives had changed forever. There was no going back to simple salvage runs after this. Tell me more about these void harvesters, he said. The more we know about our enemy, the better our chances. As Lysithea began to explain, Mason listened carefully. Knowledge was power, and right now they needed all the power they could get. Callisto Station hung in space like a spider in its web. It was not a pretty sight. Made from old ships and scrap metal welded together, it was home to those who preferred to live outside Alliance law. Charming place, Olivia said as they approached. It's safe, Mason replied. For now. They had avoided the void harvesters for 3 days, taking a roundabout path through rarely used jump points. But fuel was low and they needed supplies. Lysithea stood by the viewport watching the station grow larger. She wore clothes borrowed from Kelly. Simple pants and a shirt that looked strange against her pearl-like skin. Your people do not trust authority, she observed. Mason smiled. Some of us don't. The ones here definitely don't. Docking was simple enough. The station didn't care who came or went as long as they paid the fees. Mason used the last of their credits to secure a berth. "We need to find someone who knows about the Luminar," he told his crew as they prepared to disembark. "Someone who can help us get Lysithea home." "I'll stay with the ship," Ben offered. "Keep the engines ready in case we need to leave fast." Mason nodded. "Good idea. Olivia, Laura, you're with me and Lysithea. Kelly, help Ben." They covered Lysithea with a hooded cloak before leaving the ship. Even so, her strange beauty drew looks as they made their way through the crowded corridors of Callisto Station. "Keep your head down," Mason whispered to her. "We don't want to attract attention." Too late. A woman stepped into their path, blocking the way forward. She was tall and slender, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Carter," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise to see you here." Mason tensed. "Daphne Wells. Last I heard, you were working for the Alliance." "Former Alliance," Daphne corrected. "I prefer independent research now." Her gaze shifted to Lysithea, whose face was partly hidden by the hood. "And who's your shy friend?" Before Mason could answer, Daphne reached out and pushed back Lysithea's hood. Her eyes widened. "Luminar," she breathed. "A live Luminar here?" Mason grabbed Daphne's arm. "Keep your voice down." Daphne looked around quickly, then nodded. "My quarters now before someone else notices." Mason hesitated, but they had few options. He nodded to his crew and they followed Daphne through the winding corridors of the station. Daphne's quarters were larger than Mason expected, and filled with strange objects and screens showing star charts. "You know about the Luminar?" Mason asked once the door was locked behind them. "I've spent my career studying them," Daphne replied, her eyes never leaving Lysithea. "They've been watching humanity for centuries but never making official contact." Lysithea removed her hood completely. "How do you know this?" "I found evidence in ancient ruins on Mars," Daphne explained, "and intercepted transmissions near the outer planets." She stepped closer. "But I never thought I'd meet one of you in person." Lysithea stood tall, unafraid. "I am Lysithea of House Celastus. I need to return to my people." Daphne's eyebrows rose. "House Celastus?" "The royal family." She turned to Mason. "Do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" "We rescued her from slavers," Mason said. "And now those slavers are hunting us." "Not just slavers," Daphne said grimly. "If she's really from House Celastus, you're caught in the middle of something much bigger." She walked to one of her screens and brought up an image of a massive ship. "The Luminar fleet has been mobilizing near the edge of your solar system. Warships." Mason felt a chill run down his spine. "Because they're looking for Lysithea? They think she was assassinated," Daphne confirmed. "Diplomatic missions are protected by ancient laws. If she was killed during one war," Lysithea finished. "As I told you," Daphne studied Lysithea with open curiosity. "I can help you. I have contacts who want peaceful relations with the Luminar. We can get you back to your people." Mason didn't fully trust Daphne, but they needed allies. "What's your plan?" "Rest here tonight," Daphne said. "Tomorrow I'll arrange transport to a secure location where we can contact the Luminar fleet without the Alliance finding out." They had little choice but to agree. Daphne offered them food and beds, and for the first time in days, they could relax a little. As night fell on the station, an artificial cycle of light and dark, Mason found Lysithea alone in the small common area of Daphne's quarters. "You should sleep," he told her. "Luminar need less rest than humans," she replied. She was looking at an old book on Daphne's shelf. "Your friend knows much about my people." "She's not exactly a friend," Mason admitted. "More like someone I've crossed paths with before." Lysithea turned to face him. In the dim light, her skin seemed to glow from within. "You do not trust her." It wasn't a question. "No, not completely," Mason said. "But we need help. In my time here, I have learned to sense emotions in humans," Lysithea said. "Your feelings are complex." Mason smiled despite himself. "That's one way to put it. You fear for your crew," she continued. "You worry about the consequences of helping me. Yet you continue to do so. It's the right thing to do," Mason said simply. Lysithea stepped closer to him. "There is something I have not told you," she said quietly. "Something important." Before she could continue, a noise from Daphne's communication console interrupted them. Mason moved to investigate and found a message being transmitted. It was coded, but parts were clear enough. Luminar subject secured. Terran Dominion will pay as promised. Coordinates attached. Mason's blood ran cold. He turned to warn Lysithea, but she was already there, reading over his shoulder. "We must leave," she said urgently. "Now." They woke Olivia and Laura, explaining in hushed tones what they had discovered. "Terran Dominion," Olivia whispered. "I thought they were just a rumor. A human military faction," Lysithea explained. "They want Luminar technology. They arranged the attack on my ship." Mason tried to contact Ben and Kelly back on the horizon's edge, but there was no answer. "They might have been captured already," he said grimly. "We need another way off this station." Laura pointed to a map of Callisto on the wall. "There's a public docking bay 2 levels down. If we can steal a ship, let's move," Mason ordered. Quietly, they slipped out of Daphne's quarters while she was still in her private room transmitting. The corridors were quieter now in the station's night cycle, but not empty. They moved quickly, trying not to draw attention. They were almost to the stairs when Lysithea suddenly stopped. Her eyes widened and she grabbed Mason's arm. "They are here," she whispered. "Void harvesters. I can sense them." As if confirming her words, shouts erupted from behind them. Mason turned to see 3 figures in black armor pushing through the crowd, weapons drawn. "Run!" he shouted. They raced down the corridor, pushing past startled station dwellers. The Void Harvesters followed, firing energy weapons that left smoking holes in the walls. "This way," Laura called, pointing to a maintenance tunnel. They squeezed through the narrow opening just as more shots hit the wall behind them. The tunnel was dark and tight, filled with pipes and cables. "Where does this lead?" Mason asked as they crawled forward. "Cargo area, I think," Laura replied. "I memorized parts of the station map." Behind them, they could hear the sounds of pursuit. The harvesters were coming. As they emerged from the tunnel into a large cargo bay, Lysithea suddenly stumbled. Mason caught her before she fell. "What's wrong?" he asked. "My strength," she gasped, still recovering from stasis. Mason helped her to a stack of crates where they could hide momentarily. Olivia and Laura took up positions nearby, watching for pursuers. "Lysithea," Mason said, looking into her shifting, colorful eyes. "What were you going to tell me back there?" "You said it was important." She took a deep breath. "I am not merely of the royal house," she admitted. "I am Lysithea Celastus, heir ascendant and sole successor to the Luminar Concordance." Mason stared at her in shock. "You're the heir to the throne?" "We do not call it throne," she corrected. "But yes, I am to be next leader of all Luminar. If I die, our laws require revenge against those responsible." Her eyes held his. "Total eradication." Before Mason could respond, the cargo bay doors slammed open. Armed figures poured in. Not just void harvesters, but humans in unmarked combat gear. "Terran Dominion," Olivia whispered. "We're trapped." Mason looked at Lysithea, the alien princess who had become so much more than just a rescue mission. Now he understood the true stakes of their situation. This wasn't just about saving one life. It was about preventing an interstellar war. "Not trapped," he said, his mind racing. "Not yet." The cargo bay echoed with the sound of boots as soldiers searched among the crates and containers. Mason, Lysithea, Olivia, and Laura pressed themselves into the shadows, barely daring to breathe. "Find them," a harsh voice commanded. "The Luminar heir must be captured alive." "The others are expendable." Mason glanced at Lysithea. Her pearl-like skin had dimmed, as if she was controlling the natural glow to avoid detection. Her eyes met his, filled with determination despite their desperate situation. "There's a maintenance shaft behind us," Laura whispered, so quietly Mason could barely hear. "It might lead to the lower docking bays." Mason nodded. One by one, they slipped into the narrow opening, careful not to make a sound. The shaft was tight and dirty, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. "They've gone into the vents," someone shouted behind them. Laser fire punched through the metal near Mason's head, sending sparks flying. "Move," he urged, pushing Lysithea ahead of him. They scrambled through the twisting passages, guided by Laura's memory of the station layout. After what seemed like forever, they reached a grate that opened onto another corridor. "Where are we?" Olivia asked as they dropped down. "Docking level," Laura confirmed. "But the public docks will be watched now." Mason looked around, thinking fast. "We need a ship." Any ship, a distant alarm began to wail. The station was being locked down. "This way," Laura said, pointing down the corridor. "Private docks. Rich traders keep their ships here. They ran, no longer trying to look casual. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Can we get through? Mason asked. Olivia examined the security panel. Not without a code. Lysithea stepped forward. Allow me. She placed her hand over the panel, and to Mason's amazement, her skin began to glow brighter. The panel sparked, then the door slid open. How did you? Mason began. Luminar can manipulate certain energy forms, she explained, looking slightly weaker from the effort. It is a small ability. Beyond the door lay a row of sleek private vessels. Each was locked down with security systems far more advanced than the door had been. I cannot open these, Lysithea said before Mason could ask. Too complex. Over here, Olivia called. She stood beside a smaller ship that looked different from the others. This one's security is offline. Someone's working on it. As if on cue, a man emerged from the ship's open hatch, wiping his hands on a rag. He froze when he saw them. Sorry about this, Mason said, then punched the man squarely in the jaw. He collapsed to the deck unconscious. Was that necessary? Laura asked as they dragged the man behind some cargo containers. Quicker than explaining, Mason replied, and kinder than what the Dominion would do to him for helping us. The ship was small but well maintained. Its engines hummed to life at Olivia's touch. Nice, she said appreciatively. New model, fast. Can you fly it? Mason asked. I can fly anything, she replied with confidence. The docking clamps released and they were free. The small ship slipped out of the station before anyone could stop them. But their relief was short-lived. 3 ships launching from the main dock, Laura reported from the sensor station. And they're faster than us. Mason turned to Lysithea. Any more tricks up your sleeve? She looked thoughtful. Perhaps. This ship has communication systems? Standard Alliance frequencies, Olivia confirmed. I need access, Lysithea said. And the royal seals. Mason retrieved the container of strange artifacts they had taken from the alien ship. Lysithea selected one that looked like a crystal disc and placed it on the communication panel. What are you doing? Mason asked. Calling for help, she replied. Her fingers moved over the controls in patterns Mason couldn't follow. The crystal began to glow, pulsing with inner light. Who can help us out here? Laura asked. My people have observers. Watching your system from distance, Lysithea explained. If they receive royal distress signal, they will come. The pursuing ships were gaining fast. Olivia pushed their stolen vessel to its limits, diving toward the rings of Jupiter to use the ice and rock as cover. How long until your friends arrive? Mason asked as energy blasts streaked past their viewport. Unknown, Lysithea admitted. Signal must reach them first. A direct hit rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Shields at 30%, Laura reported. One more hit like that and we're done. Mason made a quick decision. Take us into the rings. All the way in. The ice field will tear us apart, Olivia protested. So will they, Mason countered, pointing at their pursuers. At least in the rings we have a chance to hide. Olivia nodded grimly and adjusted their course. The ship plunged into the glittering field of ice and rock that surrounded the massive gas giant. Chunks of debris bounced off their failing shields. Cut engines, Mason ordered once they were deep in the rings. Minimal power only. The ship went dark, drifting among the frozen particles. Through the viewport, they watched as their pursuers hesitated at the edge of the rings. They're scanning for us, Laura whispered, as if afraid the enemy might hear. The ice is confusing their sensors. For long minutes they floated in near darkness, the only light coming from emergency systems and the faint glow of Lysithea's skin. The pursuing ships circled like hungry predators, unwilling to enter the dangerous ice field but equally unwilling to give up their prey. They're persistent, Olivia observed. I am valuable prize, Lysithea said simply. Worth risk to them. Mason looked at her. Because you're the heir? She nodded. And because of what I know. Luminar technology, defense codes, diplomatic secrets. Her strange eyes seemed to look through him. Also because of what I am. What do you mean? Mason asked. Lysithea hesitated, then continued. Luminar leadership is not determined by birth alone. We are tested for ability to connect with our people. Connect? Laura asked. Like telepathy? Similar but more. Leaders must feel thoughts of many Luminar at once. Guide them, unite them. Lysithea touched her temple. I can connect with more minds than any Luminar in 5,000 years. This makes me special. Mason began to understand the true scale of their situation. So if the Void Harvester sold you, buyer could potentially control Luminar decisions, she confirmed. Through me. A sudden alarm from the sensor panel interrupted them. Laura checked the readings, her eyes widening. Something big just came out of faster-than-light travel, she reported. Really big. The viewport automatically adjusted, focusing on a distant point of light that was rapidly growing larger. As it approached, they could see it wasn't a single object but a vast shape composed of what looked like solid light, arranged in impossible geometric patterns. Luminar vessel, Lysithea breathed, hope filling her voice. The massive ship dwarfed everything around it. The pursuing Void Harvester and Dominion ships suddenly seemed tiny and insignificant. They received my signal, Lysithea said, her skin glowing brighter with excitement. But instead of relief, Mason felt a new kind of tension. Will they help us? Lysithea's expression became troubled. I do not know. I have been gone long time. My signal proves I am alive, but what? Mason pressed. They may think I'm compromised, she admitted, used by enemies to set trap. The huge Luminar vessel released smaller craft that moved with incredible speed toward the human ships. The pursuers scattered, but two were quickly caught in beams of light and simply stopped, floating immobile in space. One of the Luminar craft approached their position in the rings. It didn't seem concerned by the ice and debris. They're hailing us, Laura said. I think. It's not a standard frequency. Lysithea moved to the communication panel. I will speak to them. The sounds that came from her mouth were like nothing Mason had heard before, musical tones and harmonics that no human throat could produce. The response from the Luminar craft was similar but harsher somehow, more commanding. Lysithea's glow dimmed as the exchange continued. Finally, she switched back to English. They will escort us to the main vessel, she told Mason, but they are suspicious. Of what? Mason asked. Of you. Of my condition. Her eyes met his. They say I'm changed. They detect human influence in my thought patterns. Is that bad? Laura asked. Very, Lysithea replied. They believe I may be compromised. The commander, Archon Valeris, wishes to subject me to purification before I can resume my duties. Purification? Mason didn't like the sound of that. A process to remove foreign influences from mind and body, Lysithea explained. Few survive with identity intact. The implications were clear. After everything they had been through to rescue Lysithea and return her to her people, she might still be destroyed. Not by her enemies, but by those who claimed to protect her. What do we do? Olivia asked. Mason looked at Lysithea, this alien being who had become so important to him in such a short time. What do you want to do? For the first time, uncertainty showed clearly on her face. I must return to my people, she said slowly, but not as prisoner to be purified. I am their rightful leader. Her strange eyes hardened with resolve. I will not be unmade, Mason nodded. Then we'll find another way. He turned to Olivia. Start the engines. Let's go meet these Luminar on our terms. As their small ship emerged from Jupiter's rings guided by the Luminar craft, Mason wondered what he could possibly do against a civilization thousands of years more advanced than his own. But looking at Lysithea's determined face, the Luminar ship was even more impressive up close. It seemed to be made of solid light, constantly shifting between states of matter. No visible seams or joints marred its perfect surface. Next to it, their small stolen vessel looked like a child's toy. How do we even dock with that thing? Olivia wondered aloud. As if in answer, a section of the massive ship rippled and opened, revealing a glowing chamber within. They will guide us, Lysithea said. Her voice was calm, but Mason could sense her tension. I must prepare myself. She closed her eyes and her skin began to pulse with light in complex patterns. Mason watched, fascinated, as the glow formed symbols across her arms and face, symbols similar to those on the royal seals. What are you doing? He asked softly. Recalling imperial protocols, she replied without opening her eyes. It has been long time since I performed them. The small ship entered the opening in the Luminar vessel. There was no bump or sensation of landing. One moment they were flying, the next they were still, held in place by invisible forces. Power systems offline, Laura reported. They've taken control. The outer hatch of their ship opened without command. Beyond it stood two figures that made Mason catch his breath. They were humanoid, like Lysithea, but taller, their bodies seemingly composed of light-given solid form. Where Lysithea's skin had a pearl-like quality, these beings glowed with blinding intensity, forcing Mason to squint. Guards, Lysithea explained. Royal protectors. She stepped forward, head held high. The guards bowed, but their posture remained alert, suspicious. One of them spoke. Those same musical tones Mason had heard over the communication system. Lysithea replied in kind, her voice taking on a regal quality that Mason had not heard before. She gestured to Mason and the others. I have told them you are under my protection, she explained in English. They will not harm you, but they insist you be scanned for weapons. Mason nodded. We understand. The scan was quick and painless, a wave of light that passed over them from head to toe. The guard seemed satisfied and motioned for them to follow. The interior of the Luminar ship defied human architecture. Corridors curved in ways that shouldn't be possible, leading into vast chambers that seemed larger inside than the ship itself could contain. Light flowed through transparent conduits like blood through veins, pulsing with energy. It's incredible, Laura whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. They were led to a circular chamber where a single figure waited. Unlike the guards, this being's light was contained, controlled. Mason assumed it was male from the general shape, wore what looked like armor made of crystalline material that reflected rather than produced light. Archon Valeris, Lysithea said, her voice neutral. Commander of the Imperial Fleet. The Archon spoke, his tones sharp and commanding. Though Mason couldn't understand the words, the message was clear. Disapproval, suspicion. Lysithea replied firmly, her own voice rising in what seemed like challenge. The exchange continued, growing more heated until finally she switched to English, seemingly for Mason's benefit. I will not submit to purification, she declared. I am Lysithea Celastus, heir ascendant. My mind is my own. The Archon's reply came through a translator this time, a mechanical voice that failed to capture the musical quality of the original. The heir's mind has been tainted by human influence. Protocol dictates purification before resumption of duties. I have been changed by my experiences, Lysithea admitted, but not tainted. My time among humans has given me new perspective, one that will benefit our people. The Archon's light dimmed slightly, perhaps in disapproval. Your neural patterns are altered. You no longer resonate at the imperial frequency. You cannot fulfill your function as heir. Mason stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. She's the same person she was before. Different experiences don't change who we are at our core. The Archon turned to Mason, his featureless face somehow conveying disdain. Human, you understand nothing of Luminar biology or governance. The heir must maintain specific neural harmonics to connect with our collective consciousness. Your influence has disrupted these patterns, is that true? Mason asked Lysithea. She hesitated. Partly. My patterns have changed, but I can still connect, perhaps differently than before. The Archon made a gesture and guards moved to surround Lysithea. The heir will be taken for evaluation and purification. The humans will be held until their fate is decided. Mason looked at Lysithea, panic rising in his chest. After everything they had been through, he couldn't bear to see her destroyed by her own people. Wait, he said desperately. There must be another way to prove she's still herself. Lysithea's eyes widened suddenly as if an idea had struck her. The right of imperial recognition, she said, her voice ringing with authority. I invoke my right as heir ascendant. The chamber went silent. Even the Archon seemed shocked, his light flickering with what might have been surprise. The rite has not been performed in 10,000 years, he said finally. It is dangerous. Few survive. It is my right, Lysithea insisted. By the ancient laws, you cannot deny me. The Archon's light pulsed in what Mason took to be resignation. As you wish, heir ascendant. The rite will be prepared. He turned to Mason and the others. The humans may witness, as is traditional for those who bring forward a claimant. After the Archon left, Mason turned to Lysithea. What is this rite? A ceremony older than our empire, she explained. My identity and fitness to rule will be judged not by individuals but by our entire collective consciousness. That sounds intense, Laura said. It is dangerous, Lysithea admitted. My mind will be connected to millions of Luminar across galaxy. If I cannot maintain connection, my consciousness will be lost. Then why risk it? Mason asked. Lysithea's strange eyes met his. Because I believe I am stronger now than when I left. My experiences with you, with humans, have changed me, yes, but made me better, not worse. She touched his hand briefly. You taught me courage, Mason Carter. Now I must show mine. The preparations took hours. Mason, Olivia, and Laura were given quarters. Comfortable but clearly designed for non-Luminar visitors, with solid furniture instead of the light-based constructs the Luminar seemed to prefer. What do you think will happen? Olivia asked as they waited. Mason shook his head. I don't know, but Lysithea is extraordinary. If anyone can survive this rite, she can. When they were finally summoned, they were led to the heart of the great ship. The chamber there was unlike anything Mason had seen before. A vast space filled with what appeared to be liquid light, flowing and shifting in complex patterns. Lysithea waited at the center, dressed now in ceremonial attire that seemed to be part of her body. Light formed into elaborate designs that emphasized her royal status. Around her stood dozens of Luminar, including the Archon. The rite of imperial recognition will now begin, the translator announced. The claimant will connect with the collective consciousness of all Luminar. If recognized as true heir, she will be confirmed. If rejected, her consciousness will be absorbed and dispersed. Mason wanted to object, to stop this dangerous ceremony. But he knew it was Lysithea's choice, her only chance to reclaim her rightful place without losing her identity. The chamber darkened until only Lysithea glowed in the center. She closed her eyes and the patterns on her skin intensified, spreading until her entire body seemed to be composed of intricate, luminous script. The liquid light around her began to swirl, rising in tendrils that wrapped around her floating form. A humming filled the air, growing in complexity, until it became a symphony of overlapping tones. Mason realized that what he was hearing was the collective voice of the Luminar species, millions of minds joining in a single chorus. Lysithea's body arched as if in pain, but her face showed only concentration. The light flowing through her pulsed in rhythm with the humming. What's happening? Laura whispered. She is connecting, the Archon explained, his tone surprisingly respectful. Every Luminar across the galaxy is testing her, challenging her claim. The process continued for what seemed like hours. The light flowing through Lysithea changed colors, sometimes darkening to near black, sometimes blazing white-hot. Through it all, she remained suspended in the center, her face showing the strain of her mental battle. Finally, something changed. The humming shifted, becoming harmonious where before it had been challenging. The light around Lysithea stabilized into a golden glow that spread throughout the chamber. 97% synchronization, the Archon announced, his voice containing what sounded like awe, the highest in recorded history. Lysithea's eyes opened. They were different now. No longer shifting colors, but a pure, radiant gold that matched the light surrounding her. The collective has spoken, the Archon declared, bowing deeply. Lysithea Celestis is recognized not merely as heir, but as emperor. The throne is no longer vacant. Lysithea descended slowly until her feet touched the floor. The light that had enveloped her didn't fade but seemed to become part of her, giving her an authority and presence that commanded attention. My first decree as emperor, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that stirred emotions Mason couldn't name, is to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. No longer will we observe from shadows. The assembled Luminar bowed in acceptance. Even the Archon, who had been so opposed to her before, showed no sign of